Hi, this is Miss Kristy, and we're reading Incidents: Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs, and with some bees and some lilacs, and this smells so good. This one is chapter 5, The Trials of Girlhood. This is a difficult chapter, so if you, it's okay to skip this one, and I'll do a summary at the beginning of the next chapter so you can kind of get the idea. During the first years of my service in Dr. Flint's family, I was accustomed to share my indulgences with the children of my mistress. Though this seemed to me no more than right, I was grateful for it, and I tried to merit the kindness by the faithful discharge of my duties. But now I entered on my 15th year, a sad epoch in the life of a slave girl. My master began to whisper foul words in my ear. Young as I was, I could not remain ignorant of their import, and I tried to treat them with indifference or contempt. The master's age, my extreme youth, and the fear that his conduct would be reported to my grandmother made him bear this treatment for many months. He was a crafty man and resorted to many means to accomplish his purposes. Sometimes he had stormy, terrific ways that made his victims tremble. Sometimes he assumed a gentleness that he thought must surely subdue. Of the two, I preferred his stormy moods, although they left me trembling. He tried to his utmost to corrupt my pure principles my grandmother had instilled. He peopled my young mind with unclean images, such as only a vile monster could think of. I turned from him with disgust and hatred, but he was my master. I was compelled to live under the same roof with him, where I saw a man 40 years my senior daily violating the most sacred commandments of nature. He told me I was his property, that I must be subject to his will in all things. My soul revolted against the mean tyranny. But where could I turn for protection? No matter whether the slave girl be as black as ebony or as fair as her mistress. In either case, there is no shadow of law to protect her from insult, from violence, or even from death. All these things inflicted by fiends who bear the shape of men. The mistress, who ought to protect the helpless victim, has no other feelings towards her but those of jealousy and rage. And there's a note at the bottom: the murder of a slave in North Carolina would not be prosecuted for homicide, nor did the law protect a slave woman from rape. Yeah. The degradation, the wrongs, the vices that grow out of slavery are more than I can describe. They are greater than you would willingly believe. Surely, if you credited one half the truths that are told you concerning the helpless millions suffering in this cruel bondage, you at the North would not help to tighten the yoke. You surely would refuse to do for the master on your own soil the mean and cruel work which trained bloodhounds and the lowest class of whites do for him in the South. So I want to read this part again, and I want you to think about the question that I gave you. Why did Harriet Jacobs write this? Why did Linda/Harriet Jacobs write this book? She's speaking directly to the reader at this point, at the top of 35. Surely if you credited one half the truths that are told you concerning the helpless millions suffering in this cruel bondage, you at the North would not help to tighten the yoke. And it's basically make slavery stronger. You would not do that. You surely would refuse to do for the master on your own soil the mean and cruel work which trained bloodhounds and the lowest class of whites do for him at the South. Why did she write this? Everywhere the years bring to all enough of sin and sorrow, but in slavery the very dawn of life is darkened by these shadows. Even the little child who is accustomed to wait on her mistress and her children will learn before she is 12 years old why it is that her mistress hates such and such a one among the slaves. Perhaps the child's own mother is among those hated ones. She listens to violent outbreaks of jealous passion and cannot help understanding what is the cause. What is the cause? She will become prematurely knowing in evil things. Soon she will learn to tremble when she hears her master's footfall. She will be compelled to realize that she is no longer a child. If God has bestowed beauty upon her, it will prove her greatest curse. That which demands admiration in the white woman only hastens the degradation of the female slave. I know that some are too much brutalized by slavery to feel humiliation of their position, but many slaves feel it most acutely and shrink from the memory of it. I cannot tell how much I suffered in the presence of these wrongs, nor how I am still pained by the retrospect. My master met me at every turn, reminding me that I belonged to him, swearing by heaven and earth that he would compel me to submit to him. If I went out for a breath of fresh air after a day of unwearied toil, his footsteps dogged me. If I knelt by my mother's grave, his dark shadow fell on me even there. The light heart which nature had given me became heavy with sad forebodings. The other slaves in my master's house noticed the change. Many of them pitied me, but none dared to ask the cause. They had no need to inquire. They knew too well the guilty practices under that roof, and they were aware that to speak of them was an offense that never went unpunished. I longed for someone to confide in. I would have given the world to have laid my head on my grandmother's faithful bosom and told her all my troubles. But Dr. Flint swore he would kill me if I was not as silent as the grave. Then, although my grandmother was all to me, I feared her as well as loved her. I'd been accustomed to look up to her with a respect bordering upon awe. I was very young and felt shamefaced about telling her such impure things, especially as I knew her to be very strict on such subjects. Moreover, she was a woman of high spirit. She was usually very quiet in her demeanor, but if her indignation was once roused, it was not very easily quelled. I had been told that she once chased a white gentleman with a loaded pistol because he insulted one of her daughters. I dreaded the consequences of a violent outbreak, and both pride and fear kept me silent. But though I did not confide in my grandmother and even evaded her vigilant watchfulness and inquiry, her presence in the neighborhood was some protection to me. Though she had been a slave, Dr. Flint was afraid of her. He dreaded her scorching rebukes. Moreover, she was known and patronized by many people, and he did not wish to have his villainy made public. It was lucky for me that I did not live in a distant plantation, but in a town not so large that the inhabitants were ignorant of each other's affairs. Bad as laws were, can you still see me? Wow. I can't. Hold on a second. Is that better? Okay. Bad as the laws and the customs in slaveholding community, the doctor, as a professional man, deemed it prudent to keep up some outward show of decency. Oh, what days and nights of fear and sorrow that man caused me. Reader, it is not to awaken sympathy for myself that I am telling you truthfully what I suffered in slavery. So she tells you right now, she didn't write this book for you to feel sorry for her. I do it to kindle a flame of compassion in your hearts. Let me repeat. I do it to kindle a flame of compassion in your hearts for my sisters who are still in bondage, suffering as I once suffered. So she's who's reading this book? Do you think slaves at that time, most of them knew how to read or were ever allowed to learn how to read? So if it's white people reading, who's reading it? It's the white people. So why did she write this book? I once saw two beautiful children playing together. One was a fair white child, the other was her slave, and also her sister. When I saw them embracing each other and heard their joyous laughter, I turned sadly away from the lovely sight. I foresaw the inevitable blight that would fall on the little slave's heart. I knew how soon her laughter would be changed to sighs. The fair child grew up to be a still fairer woman. From childhood to womanhood, her pathway was blooming with flowers and overarched by a sunny sky. Scarcely one day of her life had been clouded when the sun rose on her happy bridal morning. How had those years dealt with her slave sister, the little playmate of her childhood? She also was very beautiful, but the flowers and sunshine of love were not for her. She drank the cup of sin and shame and misery, whereof her persecuted race are compelled to drink. In view of these things, why are ye silent, ye free men and women of the North? Why do your tongues falter in maintenance of the right? Would that I had more ability, but my heart is so full and my pen is so weak. These are noble men and women who plead for us, striving to help those who cannot help themselves. God bless them. God give them strength and courage to go on. God bless those everywhere who are laboring to advance the cause of humanity. So, why did Harriet Jacobs write this? and this is a narrative, so it's a true story written like a novel. Yes, you're right. She wrote it to try to convince people of the North to help end slavery. And that is the end of chapter 5.